In this video, I want to look at defining fractions. Fractions occur very naturally when we want to consider a portion of an object or a quantity. As an example, we can talk about 1/8 of a pizza, 2/3 of the houses in a neighborhood, 9/10 of the profit, or 5/4 of a cup of water. And all of these examples use the word of. And all of the fractions represent a portion of some object, collection of objects, or quantity. Using that idea, let's try to define this fraction a over b. Let's start with some kind of object, collection, or other quantity. We can talk about something like a pizza, a group of people, or something like money. In order to define the fraction a over b, we need to start by defining the fraction 1 over b. We're going to start by splitting our object, collection, or other quantity into b pieces of equal size. If I'm talking about something like a pizza, we'll cut the pizza into b pieces. If we're talking about students in a room, we will break them up into b groups of equal size. 1 over b is then defined to be the amount formed by one of these groups. So once I break them up into b pieces of equal size, looking at one of those pieces tells me what 1 over b is. A over b is then a pieces of size 1 over b. So now that we have our idea of 1 over b, the number on the top of the fraction tells me how many of those pieces we have. To help us visualize this idea, let's start with this rectangular strip. We then break this strip up into 8 equal pieces, and while my pieces are not perfectly equal since I'm drawing this by hand, we can get the idea. Since we have 8 pieces, each one of these pieces represents 1 over 8. So, if I want to represent a number like 5 over 8, then in that case, I would take 5 of these pieces that are each 1 over 8. If I were to take 9 of these pieces, that would represent 9 over 8. When looking at a fraction a over b, this number a on top is known as the numerator, the number b on bottom is known as the denominator. The word numerator comes from number, and the numerator tells us the number of parts. The word denominator comes from name and is related to denomination, which tells us what type of something is. So these words really fit with what these different pieces of the fraction are telling us. I now want to highlight the 3 key components in this definition of fractions. If I'm looking at a fraction a over b, that means I have a parts. Each part is of size b of the unit amount. So we do need to know exactly what 1 stands for when we're talking about these fractions. There are 2 ways that we can kind of think about these fractions and 2 ways we can focus on them. Sometimes we may focus on the idea that we have a parts, each of size b. This allows us to focus on the details that tell us the exact amount a fraction specifies. As an example, let's suppose we have 1 pizza broke into 8 pieces. So, if we want to think of 5/8 of a pizza, what we're thinking of is 5 parts, each of size 1 over 8 of a pizza. Sometimes we may focus on a fraction as a over b of the unit amount. We focus on the idea that a fraction is a number that tells us how much of a unit amount there is. So once again, let's suppose our unit amount is 1 pizza. Then we would think of something like 3 pizzas as having 3 full pizzas. If we wanted to think of 5/8 pizzas, we would think of it as a number of pizzas. So instead of focusing on the fact that we have 5 parts, each that are about 1/8 of a pizza, we would think of it as just having 5/8 of a pizza. So we focus on it as an amount of pizza that we have, rather than the number of individual pieces in their size.